All right, so this is the first Regents meeting for this term. I'm hoping to schedule more later. And on other topics, if people have any ideas, this one's going to be on materials, starting off with weapon materials, going from the core and then out from there, and maybe touching on armor or guard materials after that. This is going to be just people can pipe up whenever they have something to add. And let's go ahead and get rolling. So,
However, go ahead and start on. So, core wise, for a short weapon, we have the obvious one, which is just a carbon fiber golf club. And that's the base of any like starter build.
Yeah, a
Um,
modern day like usable because I mean you could use PVC, but
yeah, the
well,
the days of building things on PVC, you can get carbon golf clubs from just about any thrift store for $2 to $3 a piece. Um, Here in West March, if you're going to attend something that I'm going to be at and you want some golf clubs, I sell them for $1 a piece. I have a good chunk of them. I know there's still a stock down San Diego way that we can distribute them. These are cores that are just floating around the state that we can get to new people. Um, Beyond that, especially as when it comes to actual purchasable places, I'm not as well versed on that, but I know your stuff is amazing. So, do you want to kind of explain those things, like more prevalent cores and quality and where you can get them?
yeah, absolutely. Um, so typically when I decide what I want to use as a core for a weapon, I kind of depend what it kind of depends on what I want that weapon to do. You know, if I'm trying to build something super budget, I have like I said a stock of your golf shafts sitting around my house, or I'll use 3/8 fiberglass, solid fiberglass. Uh, it's cheap. You can get it for like $1.09 for 48 inches at Tractor Supply. Um, and they make good, cheap beater swords. You got to build them up a little bit to fit inside a lot of tube foams. But if you're building them off like into like a flat blade or something, I mean, they're cheap. They aren't super expensive, or they aren't super hard to work with. They aren't super heavy because they're very thin, but you can only get about 33 to 34 inches out of them.
For the Are you talking about the 3/8 fibers?
Yeah, I wouldn't typically do much longer than that. They get too flexy. Um, so that's like this, like the hyper cheap end option for your, your run of the mill short. Um, then you move up to things like recycled golf shafts. You find those a lot of Goodwill, a lot of thrift stores, things of that nature. Then you move into what is like the industry standard, which is kite spar or filament wound epoxy tubing. You can find this at various bless you, at various um, plasticine like supply stores like Tap Plastics, stocks typically 505 and 524, which are like the two standard size kite spars we use. If you don't have one of those local to you, they ship. Um, in addition to Taps Plastics, there's also Goodwin's. Uh, Goodwin's even has like a 4 LARP section, which has 505 and 524, and I think of maybe 602. Um, but that's like your middle average run of the mill. They run about between $8 and $9 for 505 and 524 respectively, and you get about 54 inches out of them. Uh, you can use those to build up to a max long. I've used both. The 505 it tends to be a little bit iffier at that length, but it's still a very suitable weapon core, and it's what I use in my standard shorts. Um, and I use the 524 for bell swords. If I want a cross game, and long swords. So moving from those two, which are kind of like the standard middle ground, we start to get into a bit more high end stuff. Um, do you have something to say, Bacchus?
No, no, I'm listening.
Okay, I just like gosh. Um, So outside of your standard fiberglass tubes, you start to get into carbon fibers. Um, and one of the best functioning cores for our game for a short sword is a .312 solid carbon fiber shaft. These things are absolutely feather light. They are a small diameter, so if you're building flat blades, you can have almost half as narrow blade as you could with a piece of kite spar. And because they're pultruded, which is just straight line strands of carbon fiber, they're very stiff, especially at short lengths. You get the same flex out of a solid .312 carbon fiber rod as you would out of, say, 505 or 524 kite spar. So those, I would say, are kind of like the average odds and ends that you will typically see for short swords. A special mention, because I bought them and I bought one and I really can't wait to use it, is there's an Australian LARP company that actually sells curved cores. Like, they're manufactured curved. They it's not like they're not cut curved out of a sheet. They are manufactured with bend in them. They're about 0.4 inches thick. The one I got was 37 inches long, but they have that one's for a like a scimitar. But they have one for like sham shears, which have a really dramatic curve, and they have one for katanas, which is just longer. I say honorable mention because these cores are like $30 a piece. They're a decent chunk of money, but they fulfill that sort of niche that a lot of people have. That's kind of hard to do. That's not kind of hard to do, but harder to do off a straight core than with a function-made curved core.
I'm going to jump in real fast because for those that are unaware, so the golf clubs are a hollow carbon fiber tube that tapers. When we talk about kite spar, we're also talking about it's a hollow straight tube that has a
Yes.
wall thickness. And the solid carbon fiber is just that. It's a solid rod. And all of these are round. Now, do you have any access to I-beams or square fiber?
Yeah, you can also find that at Tap Plastics. They sell square fiberglass. ACP Composites is a California local company that sells a lot of carbon fiber stuff. So that's where I get my carbon fiber rounds, ACP Composites. They are in Livermore, so if you're in that area, if you can get to that area reasonably quickly, I mean, you can save on shipping. Even so, shipping's not super expensive if you're in California. But they also have.
Do they do wound carbon fiber like 8-footers?
I
Like
haven't.
but carbon?
I haven't tested their hollow cores. I've only used their solids.
Okay.
And they sell the solids in between 4-foot lengths and then 8-foot lengths. So you can choose between those. I build a lot of like 6-footers off their .472 solid carbon fiber.
Okay. So jumping in myself here, I know Bayless has been experimenting with creating curved carbon fiber cores as well. He's mentioned he might try and make it on tonight. I know he's planning to maybe sell them eventually. He hasn't really decided on that yet or maxed it out. But he is another resource on that hopefully will come back later tonight.
Yeah, I remember.
Sorry, I would definitely love to see his process, because creating a round tube that is curved that contains carbon fiber is significantly different than actually creating a core that's capable of handling what we're doing. And I only point that out because I have seen people that are like, "Oh, I'm making a curved fiberglass thing," and all they did was create a mold and then roll up some fiberglass cloth and then lay it in the mold and cover it in resin. And we're like, it's a curved core. and then it snapped really fast after a lot of investment. So I would love to see what he's doing and how he's doing that, because as Halber was saying earlier, the carbon fiber is the reason it works so well is that the carbon fiber strands aren't gridded in the core. They're drawn out as long fibers, which are then reinforced with the resin. And that's what creates the rigidity and lightness that we see in common stuff.
Yeah, I don't know his process. I have seen the weapons in use, and they're holding up fine. But yeah, I don't know his process for them.
Fantastic. That's
Very
exciting.
Cool. Can't wait to get my hands on one because the shipping from Australia was murder. It was like 40, whatever the Australian currency is, dollar reduce. I don't know. It was expensive.
So what you're saying is we need to order together and order like a dozen of them.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
I bought 2 and it cost me $100 altogether. So I was less.
It's not horrible, but it would be a lot better if it was, 6 for 200.
Yeah, of course. And I had to look it back up because it's been a while since I ordered them. But I found the site. It's called Elysian Forge. I put the link in the No Mic channel. They are, like I said, they are out of Australia, so both the shipping cost and shipping time is pretty excessive. But I mean, it's just like a solid fiberglass rod that's curved. So yeah, I would say, do you have anything else, like any other materials to add on to that?
No, not for shorts. One of the, and we're going to move on to it in just a second. And I'm going to start because I've got bamboo. But one of the challenges to making anything longer than 4 feet is, so anything from 4 feet to 6 feet, you can build on the solid carbon fiber. Unfortunately, there just aren't that many great options for non-expensive cores on that. Your best bet for non-expensive is to get bamboo. So a quick lesson on bamboo from someone that has spent a lot of time molesting a lot of bamboo. So there's 2 types of bamboo primarily, and a couple subtype of the first one. So the first one is yellow bamboo. This is what traditionally people think of when they think of bamboo. There's 2 subtypes of this type of bamboo. The first is standard green bamboo, in that, like, they cut it off, they put it on a shelf, and they shipped it to you, or you picked it up from whatever store. And it's just that simple. These are really, really good cores. They are significantly better for what we do than the second type, which is heat treated bamboo, where they actually fire kiln the bamboo, dry it out, and make it more rigid, pardon me. The problem, because of the way that we use this, is that because it's more rigid, it's also prone to snapping and cracking significantly more. So if you have the opportunity, getting raw green bamboo is the absolute best way to do it. If you're doing anything from 4 to 6 feet, you need anywhere from 5/8 inch up to an inch, I would say, depending upon what you want to do. If you're doing anything swung at over 6 feet, it needs to be an inch to an inch and a quarter, maybe even up to an inch and a half, depending upon how. If you're making a heavy 8-foot war pole or something like that, you definitely need a inch and a half yellow bamboo core if you're going to use it. Bamboo also works great for Javi cores, but that is the exact opposite. You want to go very small, 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch. That's what you want to be using if you're making javelins. The second type of bamboo is a bamboo called Calcutta, and Calcutta or ironwood, which is colloquially what it can be called. I'm making people dizzy. I'm going to put you against the steering wheel so it doesn't wobble. So Calcutta is a significantly higher wall thickness than standard bamboo. Unfortunately, there's only one place I've been able to find it, and that's Frank's Reed and Rush, which is out of Long Beach, California. I do not know what their shipping situation is, and to be honest, I would be hesitant to order anything via shipping. The key to quality bamboo, especially yellow bamboo, is to physically check over the bamboo itself before you buy it. Because one decent crack or a split in a piece of bamboo and the whole thing is just garbage. There's no coming back from it. Once the integrity of that surface is lost, the core is just shot, unfortunately. So if you're seeing, like, I've seen some places have stakes, like beanpole stakes. They'll have bamboo bundles that are used for beanpole stakes at like a Home Depot or even a Walmart sometimes. Check that over. Make sure you're getting at least one or two good non-cracked pieces, or you're going to end up in a really, really kind of crappy place when you're trying to use that for anything. The other one is known as Band Shop, which is a hollow fiberglass. It is ridiculously heavy. Like, pole boy. If you are using a Band Shop pole to make a pole arm, you almost have to make it heavy padded in order to get it to not just crush whoever you're fighting.
Yeah.
And I wanted to come in again on the bamboo. Another place to find it in the Bay Area is at Berkeley Horticultural Nursery, as opposed to going to hardware stores and stuff. They have a good selection. You can manipulate it, find stuff that doesn't have defects in it, and they have it in some pretty good lengths.
I'll have to check that next time I'm down there.
Yeah, I'd say next time I'm up in town, I'll have to go poke them because getting down to Long Beach. Now, all of that aside, the actual logistics of it right this second with the shipping issues, all of these places get their bamboo directly from China. And with all the shipping issues, you really have to be extra careful with your bamboo because it's entirely possible it's been sitting inside of a container in the ocean for months.
Yeah, and temperature wreaks havoc on it.
Yeah, it does not help keeping it quality. I know Frank's orders all of their Calcutta and they actually keep it in refrigerated boxes. Like they treat it like a food. So it's usually, especially its Calcutta, is usually in really good shape. And you're going to pay $5 to $25 for one of those, depending upon. But honestly, that's a great price for anything at that length. They can. I mean, we were just talking about a carbon fiber rod, which we're going to get to in just a few minutes. An 8-foot solid or an 8-foot hollow carbon fiber rod, if you can find one, is $150
plus
for
freight.
just the core.
Yeah, plus freight cost. So
plus the fact that you're shipping an 8-foot weapon or an 8-foot item, it's horrid. Now, it can be the difference between a extremely good 8-foot polearm and an okay 8-foot polearm. But if you're not like really pushing the envelope of your polearm fight, diving into that level of stuff may not be what's best for you.
To kind of segue from that, talking about polearms, we talked about carbon fiber being a fantastic core, but hard to find in long lengths for good prices. And we talked about Band Shop being relatively well available. And small aside, incidentally, Granger sells what is effectively Band Shop in 10-foot lengths. So you can get, your 10-foot Warpole cores from Granger. And if you have a local Granger, they can ship it there, and you can avoid shipping costs on a 10-foot item.
That's fantastic because the actual
like $37.
Place stopped selling anything longer than 8 foot.
Yep, I heard about that. Yeah, and it's like $37 last time I bought one. And I mean, for a 10-foot polearm core, if you cared so little about your friends to hit them with a 10-foot Band Shop core, that's a pretty good price.
That hurts. I don't like doing it with a bamboo core. Band Shop.
Oh, I do. I love it. Yeah. So to segue to I got sidetracked. Sorry about that. So we talked about these two sort of low end and high end core materials. something I personally like to do is cut the difference on both of them. And most of my polearm cores are composite. Well, at least as I transition into not being able to find bamboo anymore. I used to buy it from Home Depot, like 75 bucks for 25. Even if I only got 5 usable cores, I think the price was worth it. But yeah, so with the lack of immediate availability of bamboo, as it used to be, I'm starting to transition into composite cores, and that is simply taking a smaller striking core, like carbon fiber, or if you did a smaller section, you could do like 602 kite spar, uh, which you can also find at Goodwin's. It's great for like 5.5 foot and down weapons, down spears, speed poles, things of that nature. But yeah, and you combine like your light fast core with the heavy base of Banshop, uh, and it makes a really high performing core. It's like the pole arms that Warlord Sports used to sell. I believe the one that Rourke has is a composite as well.
No,
So
Rourke's whirlpool is on a solid 7/8, or not 7/8. It's on the white, not quite band shop
okay.
that Warlord was selling for a long time.
Oh, I could have sworn it was a composite because it's super butt heavy. Uh,
Mike's is a composite. Lothar's is.
gotcha. Right. That's the one you bought from Mesrith.
Yep.
Okay. So either way, I got sidetracked. But yeah, thank you. Yeah, composite cores, they work great. Mentioning that name, Sir Mesrith out of the Desert Winds, for a long time, he got knighted off of his weapon tech, and he did a lot of stuff with like 3D printing and things of that nature. But he kind of, at least as far as I'm aware, or at least as far as I learned, pioneered the sort of composite tech. The way he does it is with a 3D printed cone that the carbon fiber inserts into, and that inserts into the band shop. But if you don't want it to be a takedown, or if you don't need it to be a takedown, and you want just a solid pull, you can build up your smaller diameter core, shove it into some band shop, and just like epoxy it in, and you'll have a very well balanced light speed pull. Because all the weight sits in the band shop, and the lighter core up front makes it much more nimble. So that's a good way to get a like nice 8 to 9 foot pull, without the weight of band shop. Without the some people worry about the fragility of bamboo. I think that's bamboo. It really depends on the piece. Sometimes you get a piece that's just brittle, but I mean I've used a bamboo pole for a long time. I love fighting great.
It also depends on the way you're fighting. If you're mortar smashing someone's head into the dirt during a jugging match, like that's going to be a little bit harder on a bamboo core. But like Evil Randy made me my first bamboo 8-footer, and I fought fell with that for a solid 3 years. And it was just like no nothing bamboo. It wasn't even well chosen or well constructed. It was just, hey, I threw together a bamboo pole arm, and it worked great for a long time because I fight with my bamboo more. I fight with my pole arms more like a finesse than I do
Yeah.
about powering through stuff. So and all of this stuff that we're talking about today, when we're talking this level of tech and personalization and whatnot in your gear, there's so much that dives into the way you personally like, want. Like, there's no correct answer on
Yeah.
what makes it great for you. Um, an example is Rourke and my son. My son's currently using and abusing Rourke to try to get better at sword fighting. Rourke refuses to use rope on a handle because he doesn't like the give that a rope handle gives when
Agreed.
he's fighting. My son hates 3D printed handles. He thinks they're too rigid and feel funny in his hand. So it's all like the minutia of what works for you or doesn't work for you is so wide and breadth. It's the reason that the clockwork thing, Julius was like, Bacchus, what foam should I buy? That is a really loaded question and is so specific and so much minutia when you're talking high end stuff. And honestly, we need to, and I started doing it, but we really should just have a like, this is a sword, this is a grate, this is a shield, like baseline thing. But that's not what this particular discussion is. And I've hijacked the whole thing again. So let's dive back into polearm cores.
Yeah. And yeah, that's a very good point to make. Is that there's so much that goes into building a really well personalized, uh, and high quality weapon. Each person has different needs, different wants that they want out of a weapon, and it's very, we hope that you can take some of the things that we're, rambling back and forth about, and you can figure out what kind of fits best for your style, your budget, uh, and the various things of that nature. Um, so I mean, it's very, yeah, yeah. Some people like heavier weapons. Some people like, maybe some people like pixie sticks. Some people like things that are balanced more towards the handle. Some people like flats. Some people only fight omnis. It's so much personal preference. But we have a lot of information, and ultimately we'll be able, like, you'll be able to cobble something for you that works from within all this information. Um, but yeah, to finish off sort of on the polearm core aspect, we've gone over band shop, which is being a heavy, relatively cheap, easy to find option. Something that Bacchus brought up with band shop is that you kind of have to make it heavy padded. Um, Anything you do with band shop, it's not going to be friendly. Like, it's just, it's outdated.
Yeah.
It is outdated tech. It is the PVC of polearms. Um,
It also very quickly falls into what I refer to as the great weapon paradox, which
mhm.
is I have a heavy core which I have to pad more so it doesn't hurt. Um, but because I've padded it more, it's heavier, so it hits harder. So I have to pad it more, but that makes it heavier, so it hits harder. So I have to pad it more, and like you eventually reach a point where you're never going to be able to get it to where you want it, even using like super modern techniques. Um, so you just kind of have to be careful with it, and make sure you're diligent and decide. That's another thing about AmpGuard. We don't do a hit test on our weapon. So what a hard weapon is and what a soft weapon is and what a too hard weapon is very subjective. So a lot of it boils down to, if I build this weapon, do I want to get hit regularly with it? And yeah, sometimes you end up with masochists, like Orc is my example, that if that was the only thing dictating what weapons he could take on a field, he would slap some Valora on a Louisville Slugger and go ham
Yeah,
because he doesn't care. Whereas I'm the opposite. I tend to make all my stuff as nice as possible, even if I lose objective usefulness out of it in that process. So, I, and I dive, I hijacked the band shop thing again. When building, especially on band shop, you've got to decide where your sweet spot is and just kind of live with it. And don't just keep adding foam because it will end poorly.
yeah. Anytime you add more mass to the end of a lever, you create more force when you generate more force when you swing. Um, so typically, what if you're dedicated to using band shop, uh, what I would suggest doing is counterbalancing the hell out of it. Um, I'm talking shove a 3-foot section of rebar into the handle section, just so you have more tip control. If band shop is what you have available, make sure you backweight it. Yes, it makes it heavier, but it makes a more nimble striking surface, which means you don't have to exert as much force to use it, making it a safer weapon. Let's
Any
see.
more on short cores, or any more on swung cores? I guess.
Any more on swung cores?
I'll mention for if you are going the bottom of the line cheap route, PVC weapons, remember that any joint that you have in it to make it look cool or something is going to break very quickly.
Yes.
PVC joints are extremely fragile.
From two professionals, we can officially say, don't.
Yeah,
If
there
you're
are
thinking
ways.
about going the PVC core, don't.
Yeah,
There are options that are as cheap and as accessible that are significantly better for you. Just don't. The
yeah. I
day of
mean,
PVC for weapons, unless you're building them for like, you're like, a piece of PVC and some super noodle for my nephews to play in the backyard.
yeah.
Anything beyond that, PVC does not belong on an amp guard field in this day and age.
Besides in handles.
Aside from we use them a lot to build up handles or like handles of shields. I use
Yeah.
PVC in handles of shields still.
That being said, something that Thistledown said about PVC joints to make something look cool. If you are absolutely dedicated to using PVC, which both me and Bacchus highly suggest you don't, if you are going to build, if you want like a crossguard on your PVC sword, use insert a core, like a smaller core through it, and then fiber fix the joint. Fiber fix is like it's essentially what casts are made out of. It's a liquid. It's a fiberglass mesh that you put in liquid, and then you wrap it around stuff, and then it hardens around it, so it makes a strong joint. There is a guide by a dag fighter named Fane Irving that shows a crossguard guide with a fiber fixed crossguard, and it's strong. I weigh like 280 pounds, and I could stand on it like a pogo stick without it, breaking. So I mean, it's impressively strong. I think the cover picture on his PDF document is him hanging from a tree on it. But yeah,
I use that fiber fix stuff on some of the joints in my catapult.
it's wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah.
That stuff's great.
Is that just fiberglass with a fiberglass resin? Like a standard fiberglass resin?
It's water activated. You can buy it at Home Depot. It's water activated. It is literally like it's like you could use it to make a survival cast out in the wild. Like it's cast material. It's great. So I would say that's probably about it for cores. I can't think of much else to go off of from there. We've covered PVC and why you shouldn't use it. We've covered golf shafts, solid fiberglass.
I will say this for golf shafts, and it's a little bit of a trick if you're trying to make a longer javelin or maybe a downstick or an absolute minimum grate. You can, in fact, take one golf club and shove it up the backside of another golf club.
Yep.
And you can do that to an extent without it getting too fragile. I'm currently working on a 6-foot javelin for Lynx Anti-Paladin. And that's what I did. I freaking jointed together 4 different golf clubs. And now I'm fiber fixing them all together and then building them up as a javelin. It got me to 6 feet. I don't know that I would trust it as a super swung weapon, but it is a quick, easy. If you're willing to experiment with it, it's reasonable.
I believe Sir Monkey's down spear is 3 golf shafts just shoved into each other. And I mean, as long
One
as
of them, he's got like 9.
That's fair. Yeah, and I think the important thing when jointing together golf shaft cores is you need to cut them and affix them so there's no rattle.
Yes.
So like yeah, you want them to seat together like a glove. To get the most secure bond, you want to like epoxy it in place. You want or gorilla glue it in place. You want to secure it with strapping, secure the joints with strapping tape. All manner of things. Like you really want to make that joint secure. I built during the last L5R rain. I built a bunch of katanas off of jointed together golf shafts, and I think with the exception of one of them, they all broke in the exact same spot, which is right at the joint. So I mean, it was a learning experience for me. I never built things that way before. I now know to better secure them, or just splurge a little bit of extra money on some 524 kite spar.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, why would you do that when you can just buy kite spar and have one solid shaft?
Because I have 500 golf clubs in my garage.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of
Looking for a home.
Yeah, I basically built. This is the way I live. This is the way I do all my crafts. I love scavenging materials. I love recycling materials. I love giving things a new life that have maybe seen out the best of their days.
Never walk past something without being like, yes, that's made of foam.
Yeah, it's like I think one of my first shields I got from a guy who he worked for Sprouts. It was Fire Scale up in Mistyville. And he built me a shield, and it was plank foam. But he's like, yeah, we use these for our displays at work. So he's like, can I just order a couple extra sheets and I'll just pay you guys for them? So like, he repurposed like just display material. People repurpose old boogie boards for shields.
I have boogie board modules and heaters at the house that I have been working on that are just. I picked them up, and again, if you're doing a boogie board, make sure it's 100% foam, not styrofoam. A lot of modern boogie boards. Ah, crap! We're diving into shield foam. That's
Yeah, we'll get to we'll get to shield foam. Shield foam's fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just that I appreciate and enjoy using or reusing materials, so that's why I did a lot of jointed golf shafts, recycled materials, stuff like that. That's why I do it. Other reasons people use these sort of things is, I mean, you use what you have access to. If you don't have a Taps Plastics, or you don't, maybe you don't want to pay shipping on, from like Goodwins or something. Like any number of things could lead you to be not able to access more premium materials. So I think the advent of scavenge crafting is what leads to a lot of these things, just because people have what they have.
a great example of that is if you ever see a couch on the side of the road and you have a local barbarian, take a razor knife out, strip every ounce of foam off the thing, and then cram it into pillowcases, and voila, you've got an army of boulders for your local barbarian that cost you the cost of the pillowcases.
I thought we were going to be talking about couch leather armor here for a second.
No, that's 1 point. It's 1 point armor. You
Remember, you have to use the entire couch.
Yeah, you turn it into a tabard.
I'm just saying.
And a tabard and a pair of chaps, and you now have loner 1 point armor.
Hey, if you add studs to that, it becomes 2-point because it's fancy.
That's true. If you want to get the studs in there, or you want to sew some stuff in, there's plenty of stuff. Listen, if we want to do a whole class on goblin crafting, I just need to make sure I'm in my garage when it happens. All right, we could do goblin crafting all day long.
So I have a question. It's not necessarily materials, but from an ANS perspective, if I'm judging weapons and somebody has been creative with repurposing materials versus spent a lot of money, would that be a plus?
It depends.
That's it.
Yeah. So
Go first.
Okay. So what I would say is, if there's no noticeable difference between a weapon made with 2 golf shafts shoved inside each other and a golf shaft made on 524 if it both looks good and performs well, and it seemingly has no like glaring flaws. I wouldn't mark them differently. The advantage of better materials is that you can create a better performing weapon. If you can make a very high quality weapon out of scavenged materials, which is very possible, uh, I wouldn't necessarily give you a plus beyond what I would give comparatively to like a more premium material weapon, but I also wouldn't dock points. Is sort of the thing. Yeah, that repurposing would be a non-negative. It'd be a non-factor for me.
So the only way it would affect it for me, if in any crafting, was if the end cost was the point. So, as an example, if I enter a Dragon Master, right, and I've got a really basic tunic and a really basic pair of rat pants and maybe a sash and maybe a hat and maybe like something, a belt flag or something like that. That's an okay, yay, great, and the quality's reasonable. But then I added my description, by the way, these materials were all Goodwilled and they used to be a duvet cover. And it only cost me $5 to make this entire outfit other than labor. That was the point of the project. So that I could see being like, oh, well, accomplished it. It's pretty good quality. Maybe a little bit more because that was, in fact, the goal of your whatever you were doing. If they were just able to do a standard dagger but cheap because they used scavenged materials or something like that, I would. That doesn't inherently earn any points.
But if it performs as well as something of higher quality. So moving on to foam, I actually believe you probably have a little bit more technical knowledge than me in this aspect, so I'll go and let you start.
Okay, so foams can be easily broken up into several levels, just like we were with cores. Your base foam, the tried and true bread and butter of foam fighting, is the good old fashioned blue foam. And blue foam, when we say blue foam is the Ozark Trail camp pad that you buy from Walmart. It comes in a roll. It is the base of almost like 5 years ago, we would talk about the blood of the sword, and it was blue foam and duct tape and PVC. That's where our games all started. Blue foam still has its uses, especially at low levels when you're first starting to craft and stuff like that. It is a great base layer of foam. It sits at about 3/8 of an inch. It is so pause real quick. Let me do some explaining so that the references, people can understand the references. Foam is measured in poundages. And what that poundage is it's based on, and I don't know what the actual dimension that it covers, but it's the amount of compression the foam is capable of resisting over a certain area. So what that boils down to is that you usually have a scale from 0 to the highest I've ever seen is 8 pound. So 0, 1, 2, all the way up to 8 pound. And 8 pound is horrible, and people that use it for weapons need to die, except for very, very specific instances. But blue foam sits at about 1.5, 1.8 pound. It is a type of foam called polyethylene. It is known for its skins. It has a skin on both sides and then has very large cells in the middle. Anytime you hear me reference blue foam from here on out, that's what I'm talking about. The next type is microcell. It is referred to as, and to be honest, I don't know the difference between microcell SPLE or XPLE and microcell EVA. I just know they both exist. Do you know the difference between the two?
No, I don't.
Okay. So the most common version of this is in at Joann's. They now sell it as cosplay foam. At Harbor Freight or Walmart, it's puzzle mat. This is where you can't actually see the cells of the foam. It is just solid foam all the way through. And that can branch from, again, anywhere from like 1.5 pound all the way to 8 pound. It just depends on your source and its thickness and stuff like that. The most common you're going to see is most of the puzzle mat you see at stores is anywhere from 3 to 4 pound. And the application for those is traditionally not on a strike surface. It is great for molding if you're working on plasti dips. It's great for sanding if you want to do a specific shape, but its actual strike surface qualities of anything that's 3 or 4 pound is too high. If you can get your hands on 2 pound XPLE, that is fantastic. That is a really good strike surface foam. XPLE or EVA.
Yeah.
There's a
You can source XLPE or cross-linked polyethylene or EVA from Foam by Mail.
absolutely.
It's a great source. You can also tangentially you can also source Shield Foam, just normal non-cross-linked polyethylene from there as well. I think it's
Yeah.
orders over like $75. Shipping's free, and then otherwise shipping's not super bad. But it's a great source for all of your plank foam needs.
Yep. And if you are from the LA area, Foam by Mail gets from their stuff from Foam Mart, which has a shop in Burbank, and by the airport in by LAX. They have 2 different locations there if you go pick it up from there. But like you said, anything over $75, you usually get the stuff for free. So ordering from there, especially if you're going to order in bulk or if you're going to have one person, it's a designated crafting location for your part, can be really good. Now, moving away from the standard skin foams and stuff like that, and those foams that we were talking about can range from an 1/8 inch all the way up through an inch total. Anything over that is really kind of unnecessary unless you're doing a very specific, I want to mold a dragon head out of one piece. So just gluing those together and layering them can be really, really good. Tubes, what we refer to for foam tubes. The gold standard of 1 inch wall thickness Frost King is pretty much dead. Getting a hold of them is in theory possible, but is an absolute bloody nightmare. The quick solution for that and the cheap solution for that, I've got it in the link I put it in one of the chats. I think it's in the weapons chat for West March, is that you can actually graft 2 different thicknesses or 2 different diameters of pipe insulation foam, which is available at Lowe's, and you can graft those together into a standard cheap tube. $5-ish, $5.50 gets you 6 feet of each size. So you can, if you're using a standard 36-inch sword, you can reblade it 3 times for, a total of $6. So while it doesn't hold up as well as other foams, it is a very cheap, very accessible option. Your inner diameter is going to be weird, so make sure to layer blue camp pad, or you can get craft foam is what we call it. It's 16th inch or 8th inch foam sheets that you can buy in the general crafting section. Don't buy, in my opinion, do not buy foam from Joann's. The size to cost ratio is just not worth it at all. So don't do that, in my opinion. I mean, I guess your
There's a lot
choice.
more cost-effective ways to find your foam.
There is a polyurethane foam. This is what yoga mat is. And yoga mat is a very squishy, rubbery foam. Usually comes from anywhere from 3/8 inch all the way up to almost an inch thick. This is a very, very heavy foam. I use it very sparingly if I need to soften a specific area. So, like on my pole arms, I put 3/4 of an inch of yoga mat on the end of the pole arm. Does the pole arm necessarily need it? No, but it's significantly nicer to get stabbed with it.
Yeah.
So you can use it there. Do not, under any circumstances, ever build an entire weapon out of it, please. It is heavy. It is not very rigid. It will end poorly for you across the board. I think that covers, and each of those foams can be used in various applications from or EVA and microcell. XPLE can be used for shield faces. It can be used on clubs if you want to try to use the cinnamon roll method. You can use it on pole arms. You can use it for flat blades. All of them just are kind of how the build is done. And we could go into an entire 3-hour class on just the application of these materials, which we'll probably have to at some point. But these are just kind of your basic stuff. If you ever have any questions, and because I'm going to be going in here in just a few minutes, if you ever have any questions about any of this kind of stuff, please message me. I'm a nerd. It's like asking me about my D&D campaign. I will sit and tell you about it until you're blue in the face. And probably give you way more information. You're like, dude, I just wanted to build a beater stick. You didn't need to dive into a lecture on the compression qualities of various open cell foams from various locations. Actually, don't even get me going on open cell foams. That is a 4-hour conversation right there. That's another one we had to do. Arrows. Okay. Anything you think for basic?
Basics. Talk about Fun Noodle.
Fun Noodle is no longer a legal material. They what we used to use 6, 7, 8 years ago.
To clarify, small Fun Noodle is not technically a legal material. Mega Noodle is still a legal material, but it's hot garbage.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, basically they changed the formula they used to produce it, and the air bubbles are super big. It turns to dust in nothing in no time.
And standard Fun Noodle is actually too small.
Yeah, and a lot of them are incorrect diameters. In the wake of losing Frost Kings, there was kind of like a seat left open. There's a lot of places like Optimum Foam Sports that sells what's called AetherTube and Duratube, which are very, very high performance, purpose-built foam tubes for foam fighting. You know, it's not really a recycle, like a recycled or repurposed or adopted material. Like obviously, Frost Kings isn't made for our uses. It insulates your pipes. But these are typically sold in 24-inch sections, and it costs like $13 a piece. So I believe Optimum Foam Sports and Smiling Foam Works all sell like AetherTube. What I see as the more like middle ground common man material, and the one that I use most is BFT, which is just called black foam tubing. You can buy it from Dyer Barker over at Archimedes Dungeon. It's great. It's a 2.5-inch outer diameter seamless tube. It's slightly denser than Frost King's. It's got a 1/2-inch inner diameter. It's amazing. You don't have to worry about the seam breaking like you would with traditional Frost Kings. Equally, you can also go to Stronghold LARP. They sell the same thing. It's about $6 for a 4-foot or for a 47.5-inch tube. Dyer Archimedes Dungeon has better shipping. He has a business account with, I think, somewhere. So you get better costs for shipping. It's like $100 for 10 tubes. And I mean, that's enough to make 20 swords if you are... That's not a bad price. It really isn't. It's fantastic short weapon foam or composite, or long weapon or composite pole arm foam, so you can have a smaller strike surface because of the smaller core. Archimedes Dungeon, Stronghold LARP. These are all Facebook pages you can find on Facebook, obviously. Or you can get a hold of Dyer Barker personally, and he'd probably be willing to just work with you directly. In my opinion, it performs better than Frost King's. Doesn't perform quite as well as Aether Tube, but I mean, as long as you build your sword, as long as you skin it correctly and everything, it'll last you a good. It lasts me about 8 months of fighting, and I fight pretty regularly before I even think about having to replace it. So I think it's a good middle ground foam. Let's see. You talked about XLPE
Pipe
and its
insulation?
applications. Pipe insulation? Yeah, Frost Kings. It's just too hard to find right now. They
For the
stopped.
1 inch wall thickness.
Yeah, the 1 inch wall thickness with a 1/2 inch inner diameter. They stopped. I from what I hear, they've discontinued that specific size for now. Whenever they're going to start production again, I do not know. I believe you can find it maybe a few fringe hometown plumbing stores. Back when I lived in Oakley, I used to have a plumbing supply store I used to get mine stuff from. So I mean, you can if you can find it, it's great. It's like $6 for 6 feet, $1 a foot, not a bad price.
It's gone up. The last time I saw it actually listed, it was $10 for a 6-foot stick.
Oh geez, well that's still not too bad, I guess.
No, not for. That's what I was saying. But an Aether tube is going to run you. I think they're like $15 or something
13.
like that, or 13 for a
24-inch piece.
Yeah, for a 24-inch piece. You're looking at you were talking about $6 for a 48-inch piece plus shipping, and that's really where you get your butt kicked on the buying the gray 2-inch tubes. Is shipping is just brutal. You're essentially doubling the price. So
yeah, when I bought from Stronghold, I paid $120, only 40 of which was the actual foam cost. So
yeah, so that was triple the actual cost. And then doubling up the pipe insulation is at the very least, that is a great way to build your loaners because they are just crazy cheap to be able to throw together. I build my loaners for $4, $5 a piece, give or take. That's how I'm able to churn out just piles of swords at a time. And it's nice to have around. I was able to throw together a Madu and a short sword and a pair of daggers just out of what I had around because when I'm at Lowe's, I'll spend $6 and grab everything. I apologize profusely. I do have to split. I will catch you guys next time. Hopefully, I love that we're doing Regent meetings like this. And if you need anything else from me another time, I will try not to be out of town when it happens next time.
All right. Thanks for coming and giving your input.
Yeah, of course. Have a good night, guys.
The other thing that I would put in on foam, not as much for striking weapons and such, but what I use on my arrows and in theory might use on decorative elements of swords, is I use a 2-part expanding foam that I get at a company called Douglas and Sturges. It's a 5-pound foam. Mix 3 parts of one chemical and another part, mix it all up and pour it in a mold, and comes out really nice and squishy.
Oh, right. I think I believe I talked to Asmin about that kind of stuff. 1,000 years ago. Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't I don't do any of the foam casting, so I don't know anything about it. But that's some good information.
Yeah, Douglas and Sturgis has their big warehouse in Richmond, California here, it's literally a block from my work, so that's nice. And then they have another office in San Francisco.
Very cool. Oh, another in that vein, as if we're talking about like decorative foams, I've seen people use Model Magic clay foam. Basically, you sculpt it like a clay, and then it hardens and swells up as a foam. And I've seen people, I believe Acorn, she is a Belagarth player. She makes some of the most gorgeous shields I've ever seen. Using the Model Magic foam, and you can find that at like Michael's, Joann's, any craft store, Hobby Lobby. Yeah, it's a. I guess if we're talking about castables, it's like the low budget option, for that.
So the other topics I was looking at for weapons would be adhesives, covers, and pommels. So go ahead and take your pick on which one of those you'd like to do first.
We'll go and start with adhesives. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and lump tape in with adhesives. So while we're here talking about things you'd use to, you can slide a tube of foam onto a weapon and then just like torque tape it down, and you'll have this kind of rattly little thing that'll work. It'll work, but you always risk the foam moving out of place. Same with flat blades and things of that nature, pommels. Ultimately, what you get from adding that adhesive is worth the extra weight. So sort of the standard for glues or adhesives is DAP wood weld in the red can. And the red can's very specific because there's a DAP wood weld in a green can. It's a gel and it actually eats foam. So you don't want to use that. It takes forever to dry. It can eat certain types of foam. It's for our uses. It's worthless. So if you're going down to like your Home Depot or your Walmart or your Lowe's, go to the paint section. They'll have adhesives there. Look for DAP wood weld. It'll be in like a red, black, and white can. You can buy them in little like quarts, up to like a gallon, like big gallon things. If you're gonna be doing a ton of crafting. So that's sort of like the like the industry standard, right next to your dollar store clear packing tape for skinning a weapon. As a little bit more high end of an option, there's barge contact cement, and barge is used a lot in like industrial settings. It's a bit stronger, unlike DAP, which you need to wait for it to fully dry before sticking it together. You can put barge on wet and just like slap it together, and it'll cure like a more traditional glue. It has really good hold. I would say a fraction better than say your DAP. The only thing is because it's kind of a it's like a sort of a more specialist contact cement. You typically have to find it on Amazon. And depending on where you live, you may it may not ship to you. I don't believe that's an issue with California specifically, but if anyone from out of state is watching this, much like DAP, barge may not ship to you. I believe on that note, you can also find DAP on Amazon. So with DAP and barge out of the way, sort of the last like contact cement adhesive I want to talk about is Masters in the white can. And this stuff is probably like the highest quality contact cement with the best performance you're going to find for our game. Trade-off being is it's expensive and it comes in small jars. This again, I brought up Sir Mesrith earlier. Sir Mesrith was knighted for his weapon tech, and he swears by the stuff. It's my friend bought a sword from him 6 years ago at Feast of Mars or something like that, and he got a 6 years of heavy use out of it before the foam even started to even remotely give up the ghost, and it wasn't even the adhesive. So Masters in the White Can is like the holy grail of adhesives. Moving slightly away from contact cements, there's spray adhesives. And actually, going back to glue stuff, I want to give an honorable mention to Gorilla Glue, both the standard sort of amber honey colored stuff and Gorilla Glue Clear. I would never use these two where I would traditionally use DAP, like to secure a foam tube onto a sword or to secure a striking surface, like a flat blade onto a core. But it's good for adhering, like PVC sleeves to handles, pommels to weapons. These are really strong. Watch out with the normal stuff because it does foam up. And you also want to spray a little bit of water on it when you use it to make sure it bonds the best. This is actually a trick I learned from Bacchus. The Gorilla Glue Clear is great. It doesn't foam up, and it just cures as a solid lump. It's really good for like attaching shield handles and sword handles to weapons and stuff. But those out of the way, I want to move kind of to spray adhesives. Not a lot of them are very good for our needs. They just aren't super strong. The two best performing spray adhesives for us is the Gorilla Spray Adhesive and the Super 77 made by Loctite. You can find these at your Home Depots, your Walmarts, your Lowe's, any of your like home improvement stores will have these. They aren't as good as contact cements, but if you really need it, if you really need some adhesive in a pickle, they'll do for you.
Yeah, I'll second the Super 77. I've used that for 20 years, and it's getting a little hard to find. Gorilla Glue is kind of crowding out the market, but yeah, the Super 77 is still working great for me.
Yeah. It's a good functional stuff. It's not as strong as your contact cements, but I mean it will work. Definitely. So now that that's kind of like over contact cements and glues, I'd like to take a minute to talk about tape. For basically all our purposes, we really need to skin our weapons with tape, just because it really helps prolong the life of a sword. And the tape you buy is kind of important for doing that. There's a ton of different kinds of packing tapes out there, and it can be kind of hard to choose one just from just by eye. Typically, the tapes that I use when I'm skinning a sword, I go to the dollar store. I go find that dark bin in the corner with all that greasy yellow looking like packing tape that's been sitting there for years that nobody touches. That stuff's great. For our needs, that stuff's perfect. It's super thin. It's very almost annoyingly soft. Like it's not rigid. It's very light. A single layer of that along your weapon is really all you need, and it's like the lowest weight stuff you're gonna find. Sir Sane down in Dragonspine, I believe some of the other fighters down there, they swear by using the USPS packaging tape because it's got good stretch, which is good for torque wrapping. Sometimes you can go down to a USPS store and ask them for a roll of tape, and they'll give you it for free. Otherwise, sometimes you got to pay $3-4 for it, which isn't ideal. But hey, you do what you got to do. Those two are sort of like great tapes for skinning weapons. You want to stay away from like your Duck brand tapes, or your heavy duty packing tapes. This stuff's thick. It's rigid. If you don't get to lay perfectly flat, it can create kind of sharp edges. They're uncomfortable at the very least to get hit by. The other thing is they make weapons hit really hard. just because of how thick they are. They're probably about twice as thick as your standard like dollar store packing tape. So you, if at all possible, you want to avoid like anything that says heavy duty. Just duck brand in general. It's I've had pretty poor luck with it. Um, let's see.
Also, if you're really light use on your weapons and it does last for multiple years, that's what's going to dry out, and then it gets really crusty and really nasty. I've had weapons where the tape is what wore off first when it had duct tape on it, and it just gets awful.
Yeah, duct tape's. Yeah, it's just not good. It's not good. Now speaking of duct tape, let's talk about duct tape. Uh, the really strong gray stuff. It's good for building up a handle, I guess, if that's your thing. I find if it gets too hot, it gets like sticky and it slides off, and it's not a ton of fun. It used to be a couple years back that people would say if you're building a flat blade and you're using the fry method, you want to do like a line of duct tape down the flat. I think that's definitely unnecessary, especially nowadays. If you are so inclined, use strapping tape. Strapping tape is a monofilament packaging tape. It's got fiberglass strands running down the length of it. It's important when getting this that you get the strapping tape that is just the straight strands. There's some that's like it's like cross-hatched, and that stuff you can use it. It's not as strong. The strands are thinner and it's easier to tear lengthways, but it also stretches weird in all different directions, and you want as monodirectional stuff as you can get. This is really good for securing your tips. If you do a band of strapping tape around your weapon caps, that's a good way to secure the cap in place without going over and creating a harder stab tip. Sorry. It's also good for securing the tips of flat blades so they don't fold over and pop out. Do just like a cut, like a strip over, strip over, strip over, strip around, and that'll create a really good, strong stabbing tip on the flat blade. Speaking of tapes with the fiberglass strands, another one that's seeing a bit more use recently on like more mainstream production is carpet tape. The double-sided fiberglass woven carpet tape. It works great. It's really good for securing like stab tip to a top of a sword. It helps prevent, because it has the fiberglass strands, it helps prevent core breakthrough, as well as adhesion, keeping the core from, or the cap from sliding. If you do in your sword builds, if you do like a strip over and a strip over on your caps, when you lay down your layers of packing tape, they'll adhere to that tape and make the bond stronger. I wouldn't suggest using it on the entirety of your sword, but using it to secure a tip is it's a good way to do it. It'll add a lot of strength to keep it from just shearing off. Some people will even use it as the sole like mechanical connection on a flat blade. They'll just do strips of the double-sided carpet tape and then slap it together, and then you have your blade. You know, no DAP, nothing like that. I've seen that a little bit more recently. Some people are saying it works really well, and these are people in the weapon building community that I have a lot of interaction with, and I trust their word on that, even if I think it is a little bit heavier than DAP. So let's see, strapping tape, packing tape, carpet tape. Those are sort of like the three big connectors that I use. Things that I wouldn't use are like your Gorilla tapes, which are really thick and heavy, and they hurt to get hit with. I'm pretty sure people have heard the oven baked Gorilla tape sword story, and it's just it's really painful to get hit by a Gorilla tape or a duct tape sword. If you use either of those, it'll most likely knock your weapon out of legality. I can't imagine a lot of places that would pass a weapon like that. So I would stick away from those unless you're doing like a wrap around your handle to maybe beef it up, or as like a build up for a sleeve, or what have you. I would otherwise avoid it. So moving sort of away from the blade construction aspect of tapes, let's talk about like handle comfort tapes. The sort of like the standard is your cloth tape. Cloth tape gives a really nice grip on a handle. When I say cloth tape, I mean like hockey tape. Renfrew is a big brand name. You can find it at like Big Five, or like any like Dick's or any other like sporting store that sells like hockey equipment. They will typically sell hockey tape, and that creates a good purchase for a sword handle. It can also be used on courtesy padding, because you aren't required to have a cloth cover on non-strike legal areas of your weapon. You can use cloth tape on your courtesy padding on your pole arms. You can theoretically do it on the flats of your flat blades. I think that's a strange and interesting design choice if you choose to do so, but live your best life. Another one I would say, if you're talking handles, that's worth mentioning is tennis racket tape. Tennis racket tape, it gives it's a nice middle ground between, because it buffs up your handle a little bit, gives you just a little bit more thickness, but it's also kind of squishy, so it's easy to find a good purchase with it. I wouldn't suggest using this as like an actual tape, simply as like a handle material, because it's not adhesive, it's not sticky. It works by friction. You kind of stretch it, and it stays in place that way, and then you tape down the top. So that. Talking about, so now that we've done sort of like adhesives and tapes, I want to move into pommels. Pommels are an interesting thing. You can use basically any foam on a pommel. It's a huge point of personal preference. Some people use cut off sword foam, and they'll just like they'll cut it into a cone, and then just torque wrap it down, and then slap like a blue foam cap on top of it, or a camp pad cap on top of it, and call it good. Some people will do the cinnamon roll method, which is taking a strip of foam and then wrapping it around the core until you build up to your diameter, and then taping it down, and then putting a cap on top of that. Some people, they choose to build weapons that way, or build pommels that way. The materials for this are really kind of picker's choice. All the foams we've talked about so far, like I said, work. Your puzzle mats, your blue foams, your sword foam, like your extra sword foams, an extra chunk of shield foam will work. Really, I think construction method is more like the big pommel conversation piece. So I'll just sort of leave it there. That's a conversation for another day. But yeah, as long as you have 2 inches across and a 1/2 inch of cap on top, you're golden for pommels. They don't technically need to be covered. You could just do like packing tape over them if you wanted. You can take a square of cloth and tape it down. No specific really material I would say is necessary for it. You could do a cloth tape over it. That's what I do. It takes longer, but I do it for some reason. Really, it comes down to personal preference in this aspect. It's not too, you don't really got to dig too deep into it. Conversely, moving from pommels, let's talk about covers. Covers are a very, again, it's very personal preference. Some people like to go down to like Joann's and just pick out the nicest looking cloth they see that they like, and they're cool with that. It doesn't matter to them. What I like to use and what I suggest that people use if they're looking to get like really high performance is ripstop. This is the kind of stuff that like parachutes are made out of. Ripstop nylon. The materials you use in a weapon, ultimately, every component matters. I believe, to making the perfect weapon for yourself, and its performance. Covers, they can be they can act like the cover material you choose. I believe is actually a really important choice, because it'll kind of dictate the weight of your weapon, and the wieldiness of it. If you use thicker like Kona cotton that you might use in a heavy duty tunic, you're gonna have a much more front heavy weapon because that cloth weighs so much. What people typically the bare bones basic sword cover is a pair of stockings. Go down to the Dollar Tree, buy a pair of like leggings from the women's
Fishnet,
section.
dude.
Yeah, like as long as it does not pull too far down that it becomes see-through, it's great. It's cheap. It's easily available. It's lightweight. It tears super easy, so you'll find yourself replacing them more often. But I mean, if you really need to just throw a cover on something and go, it's a plenty serviceable cover that I use for a very, very long time and still use on like my loaners, because I can't sew because I'm incompetent.
Tell me more about the ripstop.
Ripstop is fantastic. I get my stuff from Ripstop by the roll. They've got a ton of different types. I use the 2-ounce diamond weave material, and it's it's super lightweight. It's ripstop, so it's rip resistant, which is fantastic. It's also waterproof, so if you like to do rain guard, or you're fighting on wet grass, if you leave your sword on it, it's not going to absorb a bunch of water. It's not going to get heavy. It's not going to slap a ton of water out of someone when you hit them with it, and you don't risk soaking your foam underneath by having all that water in it, because water can really damage your weapon. It can get inside your tape, and then if it's inside your tape, it gets into your foam. If it's inside your foam starts to break down. It gets old. Like you really want to preserve your foam as best you can. And I believe Ripstop is the best way to do that. You can get it, like I said, I go to ripstopbytheroll.com online to order my stuff. It's like $5 a yard. It's not super expensive. I have someone more competent than me sew it, because it's very slippy. It's not appreciably fun to sew. You won't just like glide right through like you do a normal cloth, unless you're really, really good at what you do. For an amateur like me, I probably wasted 3 sword covers worth of material before I got a functioning sword cover done, just because it wants to like bunch up, and it's so there are difficulties in sewing it, and that's honestly not a lot of fun, but it's a very high performance sword cover. It's what most manufacture like sword foam weapon making businesses use. because it is, so high performance. The stuff I get is a little bit thinner than maybe some other people use, but it's again, it's a personal choice between weight and performance. And I think that's it's a choice I make personally. So yeah, really, as long as it is opaque, as long as it is cloth, you can use really any cloth for a cover. You can't use like suede leather. You could do something like a shield cover with suede
That
leather.
would also be super heavy.
Yeah, it'd be super heavy. It would hit like a truck. But hey, some people like, just because you shouldn't doesn't mean someone hasn't tried at some point to do it. I've seen that kind of stuff firsthand. But yeah, stockings, nylons, ladies' leggings. Cotton is your kind of typical take a bed sheet and sew a cover out of it stuff. Silk, if you wanted to use silk as a weapon cover, you could. I guess I don't have much experience with silk, but I feel like it'd be expensive and not particularly performance based. For most of this stuff, even ripstop, you can go to Joann's and pick it up. They don't have the specific kind of ripstop that I use, but they do have functioning ripstop at Joann's. I would assume maybe Michael's. I'm not again. I'm not super experienced with sewing, so I couldn't tell you the specifics. But yeah.
I'm not sure I've looked for that specifically. Next time I go to Joann's, I will.
Yeah. I know it's there somewhere. I've talked to people who have bought ripstop from Joann's and used it. It's just a different weave. And really, again, the weight of your cover is going to be dependent on how you want the weapon weighted. Just know that the thicker and heavier your cover is, it may seem like just like a cloth tube, but it really does affect the weight and balance of your weapon. And choosing the right weight and balance for your weapon, because the more weight you put on the cover, it sort of tips it into front heaviness. And if you want something that like you're gonna get a couple good swings out of, sure, do that. But if you want something more nimble, you're gonna want to keep more weight into the handle. So it's a very delicate balancing act.
So I have a question about the balance between the blade and the pommel.
Yes. What's up?
How do you do that? Is there a balance that you need to strike between blade and the pommel? Is like too much weight in the pommel versus the blade, or is that something you think about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think about it when building my weapons. I like my weapons balanced more towards the handle. I think my swords typically come out about 3 inches above the handle, which isn't too bad. But my swords are also very light. I believe my swords weigh in typically around 7.5 ounces. So having them be a little bit more forward heavy isn't really a deal breaker. I would say ideally, much like with actual weapons, you want the weapon to be balanced about right at the top of your handle. That gives you enough weight to swing with authority, but also be very nimble in the hand. But really, again, it comes down to personal preference. If you play games like Belagarth or Dagger here or Darkon, you're required to have weapons be a certain weight. So the counterbalancing aspect really comes into play there.
Does DAG still require covers of certain colors based on the weapon type? I know they used to.
I believe only javelins, and javelins are required to have a yellow cover. But otherwise, no.
Yeah, I know that our regular weapons would be blues. Our greats had to be reds, stuff like that in their old systems.
Okay. Yeah. They still have the color coding when they like talk about descriptions. Like a red weapon is still a two-handed weapon, and a blue weapon is still a one-handed weapon, with green weapons being stab, legal, and then yellow weapons being javelins, and white weapons being projectiles, which I believe are your arrows and rocks. But they're no longer required to have designated cover colors.
One other thing that I wanted to bring in on regarding covers is actually thread. It may be tempting to just go grab the biggest spool of thread that they have in the store. That is a poor plan. The bigger spools are going to be for sergers and such, where you have layers and layers and layers of thread. They're actually very weak threads. So you want to make sure we put our stuff through pretty heavy paces. You want to make sure you've got some pretty good, strong cotton thread. Don't go for the fancy stuff.
Yeah, like I said, I don't know much about sewing, so that's really good information. And it just goes to show you how every little thing matters when you're building something, and it's very important that you take the time to really examine what you're wanting to do with this stuff.
Again, that kind of comes back to my perspective because I'm not a fighter, but the write-up in an entry for Dragon Master or Qualls, and the materials that you use down to the thread that you use and the adhesive that you use really might make a big difference.
Yeah, realistically, the more information you can give to a judge, the better. I think for some things, unless you're trying to gloat, like, hey, I use this really expensive adhesive. I use Masters in the white can instead of DAP. Yeah, I mean, that states it'll probably, all things being equal in skill level and making something, that weapon will probably last longer. You'll have less chance of shearing from your adhesive. Your expensive cores. Your weapon should be lighter and better balanced and stuff like that.
Balanced.
Yeah, it's all for tournaments. It's a lot of stuff for judging tournaments. Typically comes down to the way things look. Performance is a lot harder to judge. In a tournament, in an arts and sciences tournament format. You find the real metal of the weapon on the field, because I could build a super ultralight weapon off of a quarter-inch piece of bamboo, and it's like, man, look how light that is. That must be so good, but that'll snap the first time I swing it. It's like if your weapon won't. Yeah, it really depends on what you build the weapon for. You have the difference between court weapons and field weapons. Same as you have court garb and field garb. You can do really elaborate plasti dip things that are just maybe they weigh more, maybe they aren't balanced very well, but man, do they look cool. So it really depends on the application of the tool, just like anything else. Let's see.
So I think we've covered most of the aspects for weapons. If you had any other general material things you wanted to call out.
I think that's really it. There's a lot of stuff in here. I've done a lot of talking and probably a lot of rambling. Bacchus was, had a great plethora of information too. He's definitely much more technically knowledgeable when it comes to the foam types and stuff like that. I find what's light and what works, and I hit people with it. Yeah. I guess because we're talking about weapons, we should probably talk about shields real quick. Shields, yeah. I'm going to start first talking about cord shields in opposed to non-cord shields. So cord shields, things you can use for cores, are plywood. That's pretty old tech, but it'll still make a suitable shield. You can get plywood at any home improvement store, Home Depot, Lowe's, Osh, things like that. Within plywood itself, there's tons of different kinds. And the more you want to spend, the lighter it'll get. You can get your normal run-of-the-mill, half-inch pine plywood, and yeah, that'll make it'll be pretty heavy. But you'll have a functional shield. Or you could spend a little bit more on like birch plywood, and birch is a stronger material. You can get away with a thinner plywood because the material itself has more strength. But it's going to cost you more too, you know, and things like that. People also often use snow sleds, like the round saucers. They make what we call dome shields colloquially, and these are great. They're typically pretty sturdy, relatively lightweight. The advantage to a dome shield is that it kind of comes up and like it hugs your shoulder, so it helps prevent shoulder shots, stuff like that. You can find them at Target, Home Depot, anywhere that sells like winter wear, Big Five, Dick's. I believe you can find some on Amazon. Someone talked about they found an aluminum snow sled on Amazon, and I mean, you can do that. It's not an unallowed core for amp guard because it's not strike legal. It's got to have that padding anyways. So let's see. Those are kind of like the big ones for cord shields, but you can really use any plastic. Corrugated cardboard. Some people use,
I've used plastic garbage can lid for my very first shield.
Yeah, there you
very
go.
long ago. I've also used frisbees for some smaller shields.
Yeah. Yeah, as long as it's like plastic or something like that, like the cardboard one is something that people use. They'll take the corrugated cardboard with like the lines, and they'll basically make cardboard plywood into alternating layers as a core. That makes a plenty suitable shield. Let's see. People will buy like sheets of Lexan if they're willing to dish out the money for something like that. Yeah, I saw one guy out in Texas. He had a repurposed riot shield that he had turned into an amp guard shield. It wasn't super effective, but I mean, if you can find it and remove all the metal parts, I mean, it's a big plastic slab. So yeah, really quickly, those are like the typical cores that you will find for shields. A lot of shields nowadays are coreless, just because of the availability of plank foam. It's much easier to make a shield just out of a 2-inch thick slab of polyethylene foam from Foam by Mail than it is to build a core and then slap camp pad on it and kind of jigsaw things together, which is still a perfectly viable way to do things. Just because it's older tech doesn't mean it's non-viable. Unlike band shop, which I think isn't viable, but we've already talked about my distaste for band shop. But yeah, the most common application nowadays is a 2-inch thick slab of polyethylene foam. Not to be confused with the crosslink stuff. This stuff has bigger bubbles and is more rigid than its crosslink counterpart. So it works well for things that take abuse like shields. You can also take camp pad and cut it up into layers, and then do just like you would do with the corrugated cardboard. Do sort of the plywooding thing, where you put one layer this way and one layer this way, and then alternate back and forth to build up your slab. And you can make a shield out of that. You get it the right thickness, and it's all glued and adhered together. Plenty strong. You can do the same with puzzle mat. Really, these are all materials that we've talked about before, so I'm not going to spend too much time on them. But yeah, and then for actual covering of shields, you can do either cloth or Plastidip. For shields, you can actually use something like suede leather. I've seen leather shield covers before. Because it is not a strike surface, you have a little bit more leeway with what is available for use as a cover. Again, if you really want to go that method, Joann's is a great place to find it. You find an old leather couch on the side of the road, you can strip that of leather if you are so inclined to scavenge like that. I've definitely heard stories of people in like the 80s and 90s just descending like vultures and tearing apart a couch to make armor and stuff out of. So that's an option.
I am going to be scrutinizing the sofas that I see at the side of the road much more closely.
Hey, it's free real estate. It's an untapped market. Yeah. Yeah, the only requirements for shield covers is that they are opaque and they are non-abrasive. You can use your cloths, your suede leathers. I wouldn't, not that I think anyone would, but I wouldn't suggest a tooling leather shield cover because it'd be super heavy and it'd be a lot tougher. And people might not
But
want
it
that.
might look really nice.
Yeah, like if you hand tooled a leather shield, that'd be like props to you. But man, you put a lot of effort in to get something that like, you know what? I respect it, but I wouldn't do it myself. It also might be a bit too stiff for some people, even for incidental contact. And as we all know, a champion can throw something off the field for any reason as long as they feel it is unsafe, whether it is by the rules or not. So that's always something to keep in mind. Avoid moving too far into the gray area with that. And then Plasti Dip. You can Plasti Dip shields. You can find, with Plasti Dip, it's like a base rubberized layer, similar to latex. You can find Plasti Dip in spray cans, like aerosol spray cans, and in paintable jars. I prefer the spray can because it comes pre-thinned. With the stuff in the jars, you have to thin it yourself. With like mineral spirits, it's a hassle unless you have you have a professional setup for it. It's sort of a lot of work. And then you can get as intricate as you want with the painting once you've plastied up something. Some people, they'll bust out the brush and do all the fine detail work, and I commend them for that. It takes a lot of time, effort, and skill, and that's a very respectable way to do it. I use spray paint because I'm lazy. I'm super lazy. If I plastic up something, I'll just like spray paint it silver or spray paint it gold or whatever. Whatever is aesthetically correct of it. And then you can, yeah. So there's any paint really. Typically acrylic. You wouldn't probably want to use latex paints on Plasti Dip. I'm pretty sure they wouldn't work out too well. But yeah, you can get spray paints or paints wherever you get paints and spray paints. Craft stores, Home Depot, other home improvement stores. And then the most important part, probably one of the most important parts for longevity, at least, of Plasti Dip is the sealing. And there's a couple different things people use for sealing. One is through the roof. It's as it states, it is like a roof sealant. People will buy it on Amazon, and then they will thin it out with mineral spirits, and they'll either paint it on or airbrush it on, and that works great. It's a little bit more time intensive than like some other things, but it is a very reliable way to do things. What I use a lot is called frog juice. They weren't producing it for a while. They recently started producing it again. It's great. Ordered online from like Sign Warehouse. And it comes in like a green can. It's an aerosol spray. The only thing is it sprays on kind of shiny. So you'll have that to contend with, but like 2 or 3 layers of that, and it is a fantastic covering. It works well. It's reasonably cheap. And then I guess as a point of note is like you can use like a Krylon clear coat, but that's gonna chip a lot faster than something else would. And if it's on like a shield that's gonna be getting hit a lot, you don't really want it to chip. So And you can get that anywhere you can get spray paint. So, home improvement stores, craft stores, Walmart, things of that nature. And yeah, I kind of want to say that's about it for shields. They aren't too terribly complex. You can use belts or like old seat belts for straps, PVC or trowel handles for handles. Again, all that kind of stuff can be found at Home Depot or any other home improvement store, and makes a very suitable handle or strap. Yeah, I can't really think of anything else. I think that's about it.
Well, I think that's about it. We're looking at coming up on 2 hours for this presentation. So thank you so much for all your knowledge here, for sharing with us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
As always, I've learned a lot. Thank you.
And I'll be asking around for what people want as the next video on things. We might cover garb materials. We might cover actual construction of something. I don't know. I'm open for suggestions.
Awesome. Can't wait.
Appreciate these. Thanks, Thistledown.
Sure. All right. Good night.